Tonight will be the second lesson in the series that we'll call simply MDR, talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Now, last week we made this point, and I want to make it again today, and it's something that's very, very, very essential for us to see, especially when we get on over into the New Testament in Matthew chapter 19 and in verse 9. And that is that Jesus is preaching to the Jews, and he is telling those Jews that they are to keep the law. He is not trying to make up a new law and say, here's what I'm making up, but he's saying, I want you to keep the law. He starts out and he tells them, think not that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law until all be fulfilled. So here now we have that absolute dogmatic statement of our Lord, of which he says that until all the law has been fulfilled, there'll not be a jot or tittle of it taken away. So we understand then, Jesus taught the Jews. He taught the Jews under the law. He said, I'm not going to change a jot or a tittle of it, going to tell you exactly what the law would have us to say. Now the reason for that is because the law, Paul said, was holy, and the commandment holy and righteous and good. That everything that God said in the law was absolutely good. The only thing wrong with the law is it didn't have the blood of Christ to cleanse us of our sins. It had the blood of bulls and goats. But all the laws that he had, the laws on marriage, laws on divorce, the laws on whatever it is, how you treat your fellow man, Paul said they're holy and they're righteous and they are good. So as we go into these laws, let's go into it with reverence. Let's understand, as we're going to study tonight some New Testament or Old Testament passages, that we're opening up the Word of God, that we're seeing what our God in heaven had to say, and let's do it with reverence and not just kind of shucking it off in a certain way. Now, tonight, we're going to be talking some more about God's law concerning divorce, or his laws concerning divorce under the law. Now, since Jesus lived and taught under the law, how can we understand him if we don't know the teachings of the law? It's kind of foolish for us to just jump over into the New Testament and start studying in the New Testament without us stopping and saying, what are the laws? When Jesus came and Jesus said that I'm not taking away any law, not a jot or not a tittle, well, what are those laws? Exactly, what can we see by them? Now, understanding these teachings will clear up a lot of confusion when we get to Jesus' teaching in Matthew 19:9 next week. If we don't understand these laws, when Jesus starts talking next week, as we're going to begin studying his sayings, then we're not going to be able to understand what he had to say. So now, as we left off in our last lesson, we're going to pick up today. And that is, in our last lesson, we looked at the various laws that God gave about adultery, fornication, and divorce, and such as this. Now, we already studied this. And that is that here we have a man who marries a virgin. He goes in with her and he finds that she is not a virgin. At least he thinks she's not. He sees something in her that he hates, he doesn't like. So he comes out and he accuses her of not being a virgin. Then they are to go before the elders of the city and present the evidence that she is. Now, if she is, now listen to this carefully. This is going to be a big point later on. If she is a virgin, then this man who charged her with this is going to be fined a good sum of money. The money will be given to her dad, and then she will go back to him, her husband, and he can never divorce her. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, will he ever be able to divorce her. Then we moved on to another woman, a woman betrothed to a husband. And we pointed out that that betroth is more than just an engagement. It's where they were not living together, but they were legally married. Now, at that time, if she had relations with another man, it goes into detail and said if they were in the city where people could hear her yell, because she was being attacked, then she was free. But if she didn't yell, then they would put her to death because she was guilty of this adultery. Then there was the adultery that was suspected, or the law of jealousy. And this is where we stopped. Now in Numbers chapter 5 and verse 11, here's a situation of where a husband, he is just jealous. He doesn't have any evidence, but he has enough weird stuff that he's just jealous, thinking maybe she's playing around. Now this happens all the time. This is where men today go and get detectives to follow their wife to see if they can get some evidence. But here's a guy, and he doesn't have any evidence, but he noticed she's gone from home a lot. He notices that she disappears at weird hours. He notices this, he notices that, and he thinks she's meeting some man. He's jealous, but he doesn't have evidence. All right, God had a plan for him so that he could find out, so he wouldn't be living with her and mistreating her all of her days. And that plan was to take her down to the priest, and the priest would mix up certain concoctions of water and have her to drink it. And if she was guilty, then her thigh would fall off. There would be a serious problem somehow there with her thigh if it did this. And then, of course, she's guilty. She'll be put to death. But if it doesn't, then it means she's innocent, and the man will take her back, and she's free and he's free to go back into that marriage and live the way just as though it had never happened. Then we come down to another one. And this is where adultery has been witnessed. This is where a wife has been caught in the very act of adultery. Now then, what do you do with her in a situation like this, where there's no doubt about it? All right, where you find this, then you're going to have to see that there has to be witnesses in this situation, and if there is, you're going to put her to death. But notice in Deuteronomy 17, he said, "Whosoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hands of all the people." Now, notice various things here that are very important. If a person commits a sin that's worthy of death, you're going to put him to death. But it's going to be at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, not at the mouth of 1. One person get mad at another person and then lie about them, and then you put them to death. No, whatever it is, he says, it has to be at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Then these witnesses have to be the ones who cast the first stone. That again is an important thing. Now, if I am just mad at somebody, and so I'm going to charge them with adultery here, and say, I saw them in the very act, I saw them, and then I want other people to stone them. No, that won't work. I have to be the one who casts the first stone. Now, that's not pleasant. That's not fun. If you could imagine that this man or this woman here that we're testifying that she is guilty, we've seen her, I've seen her committing adultery, and now I'm going to take this big rock and she's going to bow down, and I'm going to throw it as hard as I can to her at her skull to try to kill her. Now you have to stop and think if you're going to be the first one that has to do that. So Moses said the witnesses have to do it first, then all the people. In Deuteronomy 19, 1 witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity. Doesn't make any difference what the iniquity is. Whether it's murder, if I saw a guy murder somebody else, then it takes 2 or 3 witnesses to put that guy to death. And the same thing is true with adultery. He said, or any sin that he commits by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. So now here then is another case. And by the way, this is a case that the Lord confronted in John the 8th chapter. You remember when they brought that woman to him and she was, they said, we caught her in the very act. In other words, we are witnesses. We caught her in the very act. Now they said, Moses said to stone her. What do you say? And it said they were doing this to try him, to put him, get him in trouble. Well, if Jesus, from their way of thinking, if Jesus says, go ahead and stone her, then they're going to get in trouble with the Roman law because you have to do it in a legal way. And you had to do it through the Jewish law. You didn't just pick up stones if you witnessed somebody committing adultery. You didn't just pick up stones and start throwing at them. You had to bring it to the court. You had to bring it to the elders. You had to bring it to the court and then testify. And then you back up your testimony by being the first one to cast a stone. So now, Jesus has this predicament. Now, if he says, no, we're not going to stone her, then he's saying we're not going to keep the law of Moses. And Jesus has already said that not one jot or one tittle would fall from that law until it all be fulfilled. So what did he do? This is where he bowed down. He wrote in the sand. Nobody knows what he wrote. They kept talking, what are you going to do? So he rose up and he says, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Now we see here, and we see what he meant by that. And that is, yes, if she was taken in adultery and there were witnesses, we'll stone her. That's what Moses said, and we'll do it. But now, for us to do it, we have to do it legally. Moses didn't say, you just pick up stone and start stoning people. We have now to take it to the elders, and we have to testify. And when we testify, the witnesses have to be of a certain character. You can't just take witnesses of a bad character and testify. He said, he that is without sin. Now, he wasn't talking about those of you who've lived and you've never told a lie, you've never stole a stick of gum, you've never done anything. He's not talking about that. You who are without sin, you who can step up and say, I am a righteous man under the law. I live under the law in a righteous way. You cast the first stone. So go ahead, take her to the elders, give your testimony, and cast the stone. That's when they saw that this thing's getting out of hand. And they saw now they're in trouble because their character is going to be seen in all of this. And so they began to dissipate. Jesus got up and he said, did any man condemn you? And she said, no. And he said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. He told her she had sinned. And he carried out the law of Moses. That's this law that we've got right here. Now we move down to the last of this, and that is in Deuteronomy 24, we have a statement about a man divorcing a woman because of some unseemly thing found in her. This is where we're going to talk for the rest of the night. Now I want you to listen to this very carefully. I want you to listen to the evidence that I put forth, because next week, the understanding in Matthew 19:9, as we get that, is going to depend on this. If I don't give you book, chapter, and verse for everything, you let me know. If I do give you book, chapter, and verse, and I do show you this, then keep that in mind for next week. Now, I'm not going to take all this time tonight. In fact, the rest of the sermon is just going to be on this. But I'm not going to take it just to fill up time. I'm going to take it because it is very, very important. Because it is something that the argument in Matthew 19:9 batters back and forth and is based upon. So take it really seriously. Follow me. Listen to me. As now then, we're going to get in here. Don't let me get away with any sleight of hand. Don't let me get away with anything. I'm challenging you. Listen very carefully. All right. In Deuteronomy 24, Moses said, when a man taketh a wife and marrieth her, then it shall be, if he find no favor in her eyes, if she find no favor in his eyes. Now we're going to talk about that next week, but that's not the big thing. Because he has found some unseemly thing in her. Now, that's the word that we're going to be having to look at. Said that he shall write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. So now if he finds this unseemly thing, Now let me say that when you talk about in the English language today, when you talk about something being unseemly, it's not just shocking to you. You just say, well, yeah, they shouldn't have done it. It's unseemly. It's inappropriate. It's just a small thing. We're going to find out that's not the truth about this. But we might get that idea when we see this unseemly thing. So now there's two things that we see. If a man finds some unseemly thing, whatever that is, if a man finds some unseemly thing in his wife, then he is to give her a bill of divorcement and send her out of his house. All right, then we find, again, the same passage, only just different verses. And the only reason I put it up there is that the King James, New King James, said some uncleanliness. Now that's a little worse than unseemly in the English language that's there. If I told you I saw somebody today and he did an unseemly thing, and I said I saw another person and they did an unclean thing, well, you'd probably say, well, this is worse than that other. But we want to see what that word really means. Now, when that happens, you're going to give her a bill of divorcement here. All right, now there were two viewpoints. I'm going to give you both viewpoints. There was the liberal viewpoint at that time, and that is that unseemly means for any cause. There were many Jews, scholarly Jews, who taught that word, unseemly means for any reason. If he finds any reason, he can give her a bill of divorcement and send it out of her house there. Now here's a bill of divorcement. And we don't have to read it all, but you can kind of look at it, and you see it's taken out of the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, and this is the one that the Jews used, and on this certain day of the week and the month and the year, and from the beginning of the world, according to the common computation of the providence of I, son of so-and-so. And here goes on through, and he says, I'm going to dismiss and expel thee, daughter of so-and-so, by whatever name thou art called. In other words, it covers all the bases. It's just like a legal document today in covering all of this there. So as to be free at thine own disposal, to marry one from this day forever. Thou shalt therefore be free for anyone who would marry thee. Let this be thy bill of divorcement from me, a writing and separation, expulsion, according to the law of Moses and Israel. So here's the bill. All right, now the liberal view said, I find something in my wife, any cause. Even burning toast, they use that. It's in history books. If she burned my toast this morning, and so I said, okay, that's enough. I get a bill of divorcement, and I fill it out, and I have to have 3 witnesses, I believe. Not 2, I think it's 3. It's either 2 or 3, but I think it's 3. I have to have witnesses so that I call her in, and I say it 3 times. I divorce thee, I divorce thee, I divorce thee. Now that was to keep me from getting mad and just saying, okay, Helen, I divorce thee. Okay? And I have to have these witnesses to come in and hear me say this. So now, the 2 things that's important, according to this view, is she does something I don't like, anything. I call in the witnesses, I give her a bill of divorcement. I release her from me so that she's totally free to go away and become another man's wife. And I then am going to have these witnesses, and I'm going to have to say this 3 times. So if I do that, then I'm free. Now that's the liberal view that they had. Now the conservative view was that the word unseemly means fornication. It doesn't mean burning toast. It doesn't mean anything else other than fornication. That's all it means. So I can't put her away for burning toast. I can't put her away because she sasses me. I can't put her away because she slapped me. I can't put her away. The only way I can put her away is for fornication. Now, I do this. I still give her a bill of divorcement. And when I give her the bill of divorcement, then it becomes a legal document, and I send her away. Now, as we look at these 2 views, let's look at what we read about here in the pulpit commentary. It tells us the history of this, and so we'll just read it. Two opposite opinions were held by the followers of Hillel and Shammai, the heads of antagonistic schools. The school of Hillel contended that a man might divorce his wife for various causes, quite unconnected with infringement of the marriage vow. That is, because he had ceased to love her, or had seen someone whom he liked better, or even because she cooked his dinner badly. Now there's the reasons. He said, this is the great scholar of this school that everybody looked at. So now, you may do this. This is what he said. Now the school of Shammai said it was more strict, and it permitted divorce only in case of fornication, adultery, or some offense against chastity. So there you have your two viewpoints. This was argued back and forth in Jesus' day. It was a very confusing thing as they were arguing. Now, let's, right now, keep this in mind. Both of these cannot be true. One or the other is true. It's either for fornication or it's for something other than fornication. They both can't be true. Now, which one is true? This is very important for us to understand, because this is what Jesus is dealing with. Jesus is living under the law of Moses, and all the people around about him know these scholars and what these scholars say and how they are arguing. So now, what really is the truth of this matter? Josephus writes, we all know about him. He said, he for any reason whatsoever, and many such causes happen to men, wishes to be separated from a wife who lives with him, must give it to her and write in writing that he will cohabit with her no longer, and by this means she shall have liberty to marry another man, but before this is done, it is not permitted for her to do so. So Josephus said, this is what he understands. In fact, that's what he did with his wife. And so, for any reason, he says, whatsoever. And he said there are many causes happen to men. Just many, hundreds of thousands of them. I just put you away. So Josephus said that was his viewpoint in this. So now we have a liberal viewpoint and we have a conservative viewpoint. Now the big question tonight is this. What does unseemly mean? That's where we'll spend the rest of our time. Does it mean sexual activities, fornication, like I believe, or does it mean just anything like burning toast, as some others believe? Now this is a big difference, and this is why we have some problems on this MDR question. And so we're going to see, as I've stated up here, I believe it is fornication. I think God's law has been the same all the way through in here. It's that. Now, I just merely asked this question. How about taking the time tonight to study every passage in the Bible where the word is used and let God define it? I put a little thing down there. What a novel idea. That's the kind of people we are, isn't it? In other words, we are Bible-loving people, and we say, let's go to the Bible. Let's see if the Bible will define it. So get ready. 53 passages we're going to look at tonight. And we're going to see, what does it mean? The word is used 53 times in the Bible. So what does it mean? So we're going to do it as quickly as we can, but we'll see this. Now here's what you're going to see. This word, whether taken literally or figurative, and it's used both ways, means to expose one's nakedness. It has shame of nakedness attached to it. It has some kind of a shame of nakedness that's attached to it, that's there. So if I catch my wife in some kind of a naked condition with a man, I don't see them in the very act itself, but I see this condition. That's what this word right here is, see? Now, if you were caught in the act, then you put them to death. But here, this nakedness, this shameful situation, let's see if that's not true. Now, here the word unseemly We're going to go pretty rapidly. We're just going to have to take the meanings of these, and you understand that. In Genesis 42, it says they're called up to see the nakedness of the land you're in. So the enemy, God tells Israel, the enemy will come up and it will see the nakedness of the land that you're in. That means it's going to see your undefended land. It's going to see that you're in a land without any covering, without any defense. They're going to come in and see your nakedness. And again, in 42 there, to see the nakedness of the land. In Lamentations, Babylon has seen Judah's nakedness. You know, when Babylon comes down, they're going to see your exposure. They're going to come in and see Judah that you are uncovered. You are not covered by any defense at all. You're just an uncovered, naked nation that they're going to walk in and they're going to control. It's used in the case of idolatry, Israel's unfaithfulness to God. Now remember that God considered Israel his wife. And he says, thy nakedness discovered through your harlotries. In other words, he said, Israel, I'm going to tell you why you are so bad. Your nakedness, that's this word that's used here, the same word that's used here we're talking about, is discovered through your harlotries. How do we see this thing? In your harlotries. That's how we see it. In Ezekiel 22, they discovered their father's nakedness, that is the sexual sins of the rulers of Israel. They discovered how they are uncovered and repulsed and shameful situation. In Ezekiel, the Egyptians discovered Israel's nakedness. When Egypt came up, they saw Israel has no covering. Israel is a naked nation. It is an undefended nation. Now these are ways in which it's used in a figurative way. Now then, here are some passages of where it's improper sexual nakedness without sexual activity. That is, where there's sexual nakedness, but the act itself is not caught in here. For instance, Noah's son. You remember Ham came in and Ham saw the nakedness of his father. Now remember, this same word that's used back there, how are you going to define it? Ham saw the nakedness of his father. He came out laughing to his brothers. And his brothers didn't think it was funny, so they then took this quilt and backed over each one on one side of the other, and they covered the nakedness of their father. So they covered up that shameful situation that they saw. And so as a result, they saw not their father's nakedness. Then the priest in Exodus 20. Their priest's nakedness is not to be discovered when ascending the altar. Now, you had steps that goes up to the altar. You had the priest, and they had on these gowns. Now, as they walked up with just a gown, people at the bottom could look up and see their nakedness. And so Moses then, God through Moses, gave them instruction and says, now they are to make breeches. They're to make underwear so that their nakedness will not be exposed. The linen breeches, he said, to cover their nakedness. In Deuteronomy 23, there's two things that are uncovered in here. It's there. This is where Moses said, here in the camp, when you get ready to go to the bathroom, you have to go outside the camp, dig a hole, and use a bathroom away from everybody else where they don't see you. And then you cover it up. He said, lest the nakedness be exposed. And God said, I walk in the camp, and I don't want to see this nakedness. Now, there would be two nakedness there, and that is their own personal nakedness as they were going to the bathroom. The other would be the shameful, nauseating situation of the excrement that's left behind. Can you imagine what would happen if here in the city today, where we're all crowded together, and they were much crowded than what we are, if people just stopped and went to the bathroom? And so you just go to the bathroom, men and women, wherever you are. What a shameful mess that would be, and how it would expose the nakedness there. Then in Isaiah 20, the Assyrians will carry off Egyptians' nakedness into captivity. Babylon's personal nakedness will be shown in punishment. That when I punish Babylon, God said, you'll see their nakedness. You're going to see that I exposed them. I'm going to, so speakingly, rip off their clothes and show you who they really are. Then in Exodus 16, God covered Israel's nakedness at the beginning. Here's a story of where God's telling them how I loved you. He said back at the very beginning, he said, I saw you out in the wilderness and you were naked. You were unclothed. You didn't have any clothing on. And I went over and picked you up, and I gave you clothing, and I nurtured you, and I raised you. And he's talking about Israel, this nation. And so I raised you, and I did this, and I gave you jewelry, and I gave you fine clothing, and so forth, so that you could serve me as your wife. But you, of course, didn't do it. But he's saying here the nakedness in that sense. And then Ezekiel, Egyptians and Chaldeans will see Judah's nakedness. We've talked about that over and over again. It's in there. Now we get to sexual activity. Here's one. In Leviticus, the 18th chapter, I think all of us know that most of that chapter is just one verse after another verse of telling them who they might have sexual relations with. And he says in here that you are not to uncover the nakedness of a blood relative. Now, that means you're not to marry them or lie with them. You're not to have sexual relations with them. Any blood relative, you're not to have. There's no question about this. Everybody preaches it. Everybody sees it. Everybody's knowing it in there. And then in the next verse, you're not to uncover the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother. So you can't do that. He goes ahead to say in the next verse down in 8, the nakedness of thy father's wife, and he tells him, he says, the nakedness belongs to the father. In other words, the father can go in to this lady, but the son cannot go into her. And in other words, he's controlling incest. And all I'm trying to do, this touchy subject, but all I'm trying to do is to get you to fix in your mind, what do you see when you see that word? See? What do you see when you see it? This is the word that he used. And so this word on unseemly. In verse 10, you can't go in to the nakedness of thy son's daughter. That's your granddaughter. You can't have incest with her. Or the daughter's nakedness, thou shalt not uncover. There again, the granddaughters, there again. The nakedness of thy father's wife's daughter. That would be, what's that? A stepsister? And the nakedness of the father's sister. That's incest with your aunt. You can't go in and do that. And the nakedness of your mother's sister is incest with your aunt. You can't do it. And then again, the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. You can't go in there. The nakedness of thy brother's wife. You can't take her. The nakedness of a mother and her daughter. A man can't take the mother and the daughter at the same time and have sexual relations with them. Talking about marrying a woman in addition to her sister to uncover her nakedness. Then nakedness during the menstrual period. Uncovered his father's nakedness. He sees relatives, again, nakedness, and he sees his. Nakedness, and on down the line you go with these nakedness that's in here. Now, what does the word mean, see, as we see it in that respect? Now, the word is used 5 times in the New Testament. 5 times it's used in 1 Corinthians 7. If any man thinketh that he behaveth himself unseemly toward his virgin daughter. Now, you notice the daughter is in italics, and so it's probably, some translators think that's what it's talking about, a father not letting his daughter get married, and others say it's a man that has a virgin that he's engaged to, and that's probably what it's talking about. It said, let him do what he will, he sinneth not, let them marry. And so if here's 2 people engaged, and the man is conducting himself unseemingly toward her, then get married. Quit that. Romans 1:27, men burned in their lust one toward another, men with men working unseemliness. There's the word. What were they doing? Any sexual relations there? Yeah. Revelation 16. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garment, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. That's the word shame. So here's, you see the nakedness, and then you see, well, if you see him naked, you're seeing his unseemliness. His unseemliness, the act there that goes with that. In 1 Corinthians 12:23, now he talks about here the different parts of the body, and we're all one body, he says, and the nose helps the ears and so forth and so on like this. And then he points out that the comely parts, your face and arms and so forth, they can be uncovered. They can be uncovered, but there are certain parts of your body that you never uncover. Now, what are those parts of the body that you never uncover? Well, Paul is talking about here and showing those parts could get jealous of the others. Why, everybody sees our face, but nobody gets to see these other parts of our bodies. You see, this uncomely part. So we said, parts of the body which we think be less honorable, upon these we bestow more abundant honor, and our uncomely parts, there it is, have more abundant comeliness, whereas our comely parts have no need. So our sexual parts, they have a unique relationship or part of your body, and they don't need to be exposed. That's not their purpose, and he's saying that you shouldn't do it. And then the last one, the only one that, you could be taken either way. If somebody said, well, I think unseemly just means something not nice. Well, love doth not behave itself unseemly. There's nothing in that verse that tells us anything about whether it's sexual or not. Now, if you take all the other passages, you might say, if all these other passages mean that, maybe Paul said, love doth not behave itself unseemly. Love doesn't attack the other person. Love doesn't rape. Love doesn't expose itself. Love doesn't, it's in there. But all I'm getting at, that's a verse that doesn't give us any indication. But the important thing is, the word is used 53 times in the Bible, both literally and figuratively, and every time in the other 52 cases, with one possible exception, that's the one I just talked about right there, it refers to as nakedness or uncovering of the sexual part of one's body. That's what the word is talking about. That's what the word means as you go through your Bible. Now, do you suppose it might mean the same thing in Deuteronomy 24 rather than burning toast? Some unsexual, some sexual inappropriate activity that has nakedness attached to it, that where you find your wife naked with another man. Oh, we weren't doing anything. Well, do you have any reason there to say, that's what this verse is talking about right here, you see. That's it. Now, there are three other arguments that I'll give you that are even stronger, which shows it refers to fornication. Here are the 5 things that we have. We have all these laws that Moses gave, and we've looked at all of them. Now, I'm going to take away those in the middle. I'm just going to use those 2 that's right there. So let's go back up here to this guy. He marries this woman. He goes in and he comes out and he finds something that's wrong. And he doesn't like her. And so he says, she's not a virgin. Then they go through this system with the elders, go down there and present evidence and so forth. And if she is, this guy's in trouble. This guy is going to be fined. And then this guy is going to have to take that woman that he hates, that woman that he doesn't love, that woman he wants to get rid of, and he cannot divorce her all the days of his life. Now, going to ask you a question. Could you find any man, dumb enough, that if he knows just 2 pages on down, 2 more chapters, 2 pages more, Moses is going to say this, and every Jew knew this. If he knew that 2 pages later, Moses said, if a man finds some unseemly thing, and that means anything, if you find anything you don't like with your wife, you can divorce her. Do you think that if he had that at his disposal, that he'd ever do that up there? Men are dumb, I know that. Well, you guys. Men are dumb, but we're not that dumb. No, we're not that dumb. I'm not going to take that chance. That's stupid to take a chance. Now, it makes God's law sound funny. God up here says, if you got something wrong with her in here, you got to go through this and then end up wrong, then you can never divorce her. But 2 pages later, he says, now, if you find any reason, anything that you find, you can divorce her and give her a bill of divorcement. Is that sensible? I'll leave you with that argument. Now, here's what it says about that woman up there. If a man takes a wife and goes into her and detests her and charges her with shameful conduct and brings a bad name on her and says, I took this woman and when I came to her found she was not a virgin. So here he hates her. Then it says, then the elders of the city shall take the man if he's guilty and they'll punish him. They'll fine him 100 shekels of silver and give them to the father of the young woman because he has brought a bad name on a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife, and he cannot divorce her all his days. So you look at it. It doesn't make sense. And then another thing, God practiced the same thing himself. God married Israel, and God is going to do something with Israel. What did he say he did? Our time's running out, so just look at the red. Here it is. He said Israel went up on every high mountain and every green tree, and that's where they practiced their idolatry. And they played the harlot. Here it is. Instead of Israel bowing down to me, God, as the wife should, she goes up to these idols and bows down to them, and she's playing the harlot. She's the prostitute. She's the fornicator. And I pleaded with her to come back, and she wouldn't return. And then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and give her a certificate of divorce. So God says, I did exactly what my law said. So now, as we look at this, and we see it, then we're going to see it proves it really beyond any shadow of a doubt. And that is, the word means nakedness or sexual impropriety. It's fornication, which is any unlawful sexual act. The laws in Deuteronomy 22 and 24 doesn't make sense unless that's what it means. God himself practiced that same thing. Now just keep in mind, there were 2 schools of thought. One school of thought, the liberal school, said, for any reason you've got, put her away. But boy, there's one big thing you need to remember. Give her a bill of divorcement. Don't ever forget that bill of divorcement. It'll come back up again. So whatever you want to do to put her away, but give her a bill of divorcement. The conservative viewpoint is, no, you cannot put her away except for fornication. And then you give her a bill of divorcement. Now the next argument is the most powerful. But the most powerful and authoritative of all arguments will be given next week when we get into the teachings of Jesus himself. Should you be here tonight and you understand that your life is not right with God, you need to be washed in the blood of Jesus, his Son, would you respond while we stand, while we sing this song?